Hey folks, I'm talking today about the new moon in Taurus, the cycle, the 30-day cycle of Taurus that begins on May 22nd. As you see the chart here, this is this will be for May 22nd, about 10:30 a.m. in the west coast of the United States. And that's going to start this 30-day cycle of Taurus. As you see, it's going to be in Krittika Nakshatra. Kritika is symbolized by the cutter that cuts through our mental weakness and delusion and illusion. We certainly have a lot of those now, these days. We're dealing with a lot of that mental weakness and, difficulty. And as you see scrolling at the bottom here, if you want to see how this forecast will affect you and your sign for the next 30 days, you can get the updates, 14 days of forecasts, plus full and new moon updates and 8 hours of classes. If you go to the website at astrologytraininglab.com, that's where you can get access to it. As you see, here's the website. And again, only 50 cents, 14-day trial. You just click register now and you will, be taken there. And again, it's only 50 cents for as long as you want, then $39.95 every 30 days for as long as you want. If you want to cancel before that, then you just cancel within the 14 days and you never get the the $39.95. But in addition to the forecast, you also get 3 really important courses that can shift your life and your astrology knowledge. One is a chart reading template and video, $97 value, extremely valuable, so you can learn how to read your chart. Then Foundations of Astrology course, 4-hour course, 4.5 hours actually, from a conference that I taught at several years ago. Really gives a fantastic overview of astrology. And then also Quantum Vedic Astrology, which connects Vedic astrology with neuroscience and quantum physics. So again, only 50 cents. If you haven't gotten that, some people, they become members and they stay members for, I have some people that have been members for like 10 years. So check it out. Now, again, that's part of that training lab is that you get to understand the cycles. And this new moon in Taurus is actually part of a 30-day cycle. And that 30-day cycle affects each person differently based on their rising sign. So for example, if you're Libra person, like if you were born in Libra was rising, then this is an 8th house cycle for you because this new moon is happening in your 8th house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this Taurus cycle is totally different if you're Libra person than if you're Leo, where it happens in your 10th house. Or if you're Gemini, where it happens in your 12th house. Or you're Aquarius, where it happens in your 4th house. It's different. So you want to just understand this part going in. And these are the cycles that we're all living. We're all living these 30-day cycles. And in fact, the basis of the zodiac and the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 12 months of the year is this lunation cycle, these 12 lunation cycles. When the sun and moon come together, it creates a 30-day cycle. And again, it's measured here on Earth as 12 months, right? It's measured in the sky as 12 zodiac signs or 12 sections of the sky. And so this is the time, the Taurus cycle. And again, this is the real calendar that we should be paying attention to, not January, February. That cosmic calendar is the real soul calendar. And that's what the zodiac is. It's like a soul calendar. Whereas the regular calendar on Earth is like the Earth calendar. So we know when it's warm outside, and so we know to do this and do that. So this sun and moon coming together in Taurus is showing a time for this 30 days of Taurus that is going to bring in this quality of peace and stillness and contentment and the need to really connect with what's happening in your immediate environment rather than getting so spun out on things beyond your immediate control, you would say. Last month, it was the Aries cycle, which is like the new cycle of life. Aries is like the beginning of life, where life springs forth and it's excited and excitable and ready to challenge. It's quite rebellious. Now, after that, we've had that kind of month, a lot of rebellion and new ideas and enthusiasm. Now it's Taurus, which is about, okay, but what is in my immediate environment, my immediate value system? What are my values? What do I value the most? What has nurtured me? And what do I want to nurture and support and hold space for? All of those things are related to Taurus. And this is what we're going to be really focused on in the next 30 days. You might have started to feel the last week or so some of the recent like aggressiveness and frustration and aggression started to feel really exhausting and really draining. And again, this is part of the lunation cycles. So if I go back, in fact, I'll just go back a couple weeks. We're here on the 22nd now, but if we go back a couple weeks, back when we had, for example, the full moon, which was over here when the moon was here, the full moon was kind of like where the Aries cycle, Aries and Libra get in this kind of push and pull, where there was a lot of like potential sort of maybe conflict or drama or passion, and where we got, really worked up in that Aries kind of mode, like I'm important and, listen to me, and I'm frustrated because I'm not being listened to, and, those kinds of things. Then we have that full moon that happened. I'll just go back and show it. Then we had the full moon in Libra, which is where we realize, okay, it's not just all about me and my point of view and my frustration. Maybe I'm also part of the problem to somebody else. Maybe I'm also frustrating other people. Maybe I can look in the mirror here, which is the Aries Libra harmonizing point. And so we started to maybe be more thoughtful and start to consider other points of view or other people's perspectives or whatever on that full moon. And since then, the Aries lesson then starts to wane, because after the full moon, then this Aries lesson starts to want to be complete, wants to finish the Aries as the moon wanes. That passion and drama and, okay, I'm the most important thing in the world of Aries starts to get less and less important, because we've now harmonized it with the Libra. And then as it starts to wane more and more, so for example, like the last week, starting on like the 15th or so, it starts to be less and less focused on this, I'm the most important thing. My desires, my needs are so important. And becomes more about, okay, how do I take this person that I am, who wants to really express himself and has his own ideas and his own opinions and wants to make sure that they're heard and valued, starts to become important. That's Taurus. So we then start the Taurus lesson on the 22nd. This is how Aries becomes Taurus. Everything in astrology is a continuum. Everything moves into from one cycle to the next. Again, this is the rhythm of the cosmic time, the rhythm of the cosmic, of the cosmic unfolding that we are all, looking to understand. And those cycles wind up being the cycles that inform each year, that take us through each year and take us through to a sort of completion. And again, it starts on the one second here, I'm having a little thing going on. It starts on that Aries cycle, but then it continues through Taurus and all the rest of the signs. And by the way, I'm teaching a course on this in this weekend, actually, on the holistic zodiac, which is a very important thing to understand, how these signs become each other, how they move into the next, and how one sign becomes the next, how one cycle becomes the next. You can see it here, actually. I put the link. It's a huge discount that I'm offering. It's usually $147 for these 8-hour classes, but it's actually only $47. It's the last day to register for it. But really understanding the holistic zodiac. It's called Rashi's Rulers and the Holistic Zodiac. And I talk about, you can also earn a certification from my school. The subject is so important that I decided to make it a serious offer and give out a certification of merit for those who graduate. And that, again, it's actually Saturday and Sunday coming up. And then we also have a Q&A the following weekend. So it's not just those 2 days, but it's also on May 30th, a free Q&A to make sure you get all your questions answered. So again, check out that link. We're going to be talking about this holistic zodiac. And that's what I just described when I described how Aries becomes Libra. That's literally what it is. These zodiac signs are evolutionary principles. Shady just said, where do we sign up? I just put a link. I'll put the link again. So listen, here it comes, folks. Here's where you sign up. Click the link. I just put the link. And maybe it didn't come through on where you're watching it. Some of the chats don't, the link doesn't come through, but I'll make sure that you see it. Anyway, so this is the holistic zodiac that is always unfolding through hang on. I just put it in the Facebook chat. The Facebook chat doesn't always have the links coming through, so I just put it there. Anyway, but so Aries becoming Taurus is very important. And this individuality, this unique person that you are, becoming taking that life that you're living as an individual and organizing that around your values, your value system, what you really value the most, how you are able to create value in your life is really the big issue right now. Now, you might say, well, what are values? My value, what is all that? Well, the main, sort of matrix through which we experience Taurus is literally things like our food, our speech, the other people in our life, the family that raised us and that we create going forward. You might say, well, speech, values, food, family. What is all that? How does all of that relate together? Well, just think about it. We were all raised, and again, think about the zodiac as a mandala. Aries is like the infant. It's like the baby being born. You were born. At one point, you didn't exist. You didn't have a body. Again, Aries is also just related to the physical body being born, which again is also how much of your identity revolves around your body and your energy and your ideas. Again, these are all Aries things. But first it had to get born. So if you make it the zodiac like a cycle of life, first the body had to be born in Aries, and then it's taken care of in the family and nurtured in Taurus. And that family that nurtured you had a certain value system that you learned. You were raised in that value system and raised in those values until a certain age, and then you started to develop your own values and try new things, which is Gemini, and then you reflect on that, which is Cancer, and blah, blah. So the zodiac itself is a whole evolution. But this second sign of Taurus is the one where all of those values become important. Now think about the family that raised you. They had certain values. They had certain beliefs that formed those values. You were even raised to, for example, eat certain kinds of food, speak a certain way, and again, value different things. Notice what happens as your values change, as you become your own person. Notice the first things that start to change. What are some of the first things that start to change when you start to question your values? You also start to question things like your food, your friends, the family around you. It doesn't mean the family that raised you. That's from the past. That already happened. But it's the family that you create now. Somebody's watching astrology and doing all this. You probably weren't necessarily raised with these values. But now you've created yourself, you've evolved a different and a more unique identity. And that identity has a certain structure to it. It's not just somehow I have these values. No, those values take the form of everything you do. You eat certain food to affirm your values. You talk to certain people that affirm your values. And you give value as a result of what you value, blah, blah, blah. So it's this exchange. And this is very much the Taurus area of life. And it's actually those core principles and values in your life that are really like the structure of your life. And they're not static. They're always evolving. And in fact, you're always being challenged to put your values into practice. This is why Taurus is a very practical sign. It's not about a bunch of ideas. If I want to know what people really value, I look and see what they're doing, not what they're saying. Yeah, you say a lot of stuff, but what are you actually putting into practice? Because that's the real measure of what you actually value. You say you value wellness and this and that and this and that. Well, what are you doing every day? You say you value spirituality and this and that. Are you doing it every day, or is it just an idea? It's not a lecture. It's just a point of reference. And the Taurus lesson is the time to correct all of this and to notice this, to notice how much are my values in accordance and in alignment with my identity. And how much does my identity that I'm trying to evolve and develop hinge upon my daily practices and my values and the things I'm doing every day, and my friends and my food, and literally like my speech, and what goes into your mouth and what comes out of your mouth. That's why Taurus is related to the mouth as the body part. How much what goes into your mouth is reflective of what comes out of your mouth. So look at the person you think you are, which is the Aries individual, trying to be stronger, trying to develop more. And notice how much you're putting into practice who you think you are. And so in Taurus, this is where we really are trying to make adjustments and get that right. And notice where, I'll just give a couple examples, especially as it relates to things like food or speech, what we communicate. Again, let's say that we're trying to develop not even a, more spiritual strength or whatever, but let's say physically, we want to be physically more, physically stronger, physically more, healthier, let's just say. Well, how much of that has to do with the food you're eating? And how much do you know that you need to adjust that in order to meet that goal? How much, and again, if you take it even to the next level, how much do you realize that part of the healthiest body that you could have is probably eating less like red meat, if not no red meat, and more vegetables and eating for health and vitality rather than eating for pleasure. So the Taurus principle is very much all of these things, because one of the things about Taurus is it's ruled by Venus. So it has a lot to do with our pleasure and the things that give us pleasure and the things that give us happiness. And ultimately, how we handle those things show how much vitality and energy and strength we have. Venus, underneath it all, is really the price that we're willing to pay for our pleasure and happiness. What's the price that we're willing to pay to be happy? This is one of the most important questions you'll ever answer. What's the price that you're willing to pay to try to be happy or to be happy? What does your happiness cost you? Worldly happiness. And how much of your values do you have to compromise on, if any? Does your happiness cost you energy, vitality, clarity, wisdom? These are the questions that Venus makes us answer. What's the price? How high of a price are you willing to pay? Now, again, we can look at Venus because it's the ruler of Taurus. If I want to be happy right now, what might look like happiness, I could eat some really tasty food, maybe food that's maybe even like junk food. If we mistake that for being happy, we're in a bind, because pleasure, which is what that would give us, that would give us pleasure. Pleasure is not ultimately happiness, because pleasure comes at a price often. Now, maybe we're willing to pay that price, or pay that price once in a while, or have enough pleasure in moderation to where it doesn't short circuit our happiness. But these are the questions, because too much pleasure in the moment right now, like let's say we could eat, let's say like a pint of ice cream every now and then. It's not gonna kill us. We can enjoy that once in a while. If we do it even every day, that's probably too much. If we do it a couple times a day, we're getting way overboard now. Now, that pleasure, it's not only going to hurt our physicality, but it's also not going to make us happy at some point, because it's going to drain our energy and we're going to get sick and all of that. So pleasure is one level of Venus. Happiness is the next level, which is more of the emotion of Venus. Pleasure is the physical quality of Venus. Happiness is the emotion, which is usually connected to other people. And again, as it relates to Taurus, it's very physical, very grounded, or very much experiential. It's not like an idea of wanting to be happy and wanting to feel good. With Taurus, it's very physical. But the quality of happiness usually has to do with being around other people, nurturing them, being in a relationship with them, maybe a romantic relationship, or even just proximity to people that we want to be around that makes us happy. That's the emotion of happiness. That has a lot to do with other people. In the times we're in right now, this is big because we're doing all this social distancing. So this happiness is a higher level than pleasure. Many of the time, this is why we will substitute pleasure for happiness. If we're not getting happiness, which often has to do with other people, then we can tend to indulge in pleasure. Stated simply, we're more prone to like eat that pint of ice cream or two every day if we're lonely than if we're around other people. If our relationships with other people are good and we're feeling more on the happiness scale, then we're not as likely to be substituting and trying to find happiness in pleasure. Happiness is a more subtle version of pleasure or of Venus energy. Pleasure is physical, just for me. Happiness is usually shared with other people. Now that we're in this social distancing and we're not being able to be around each other a lot, there's a lot of tendency perhaps to be indulgent, especially with food. And I think now is going to be a time this next 30 days for really looking at how we've, like maybe our food habits the last, since we've been socially distant, social distancing, and maybe correct that. Or at least we're certainly going to be aware of it. But there's a higher level of Venus too, and a higher level of Taurus, which is not about our physical pleasure and happiness through our physical body or our emotional happiness with other people. And that's the bliss of the soul, which is literally our connection to God and beauty and transcendent joy, which is our true nature, not our physical pleasure or our emotional happiness, but our transcendent bliss that doesn't need any external stimulation or excuse or source, where we're the source of the bliss and of the pleasure and of the happiness. And that's very much about the yogic concept of santosha or contentment, which I really bring this very much into the Taurus model, because the Taurus model is very much about that santosha, that contentment, where we are content with what we have. We are not longing for affirmation or connection with other people in order to feel happy, nor are we stimulating or overstimulating some kind of pleasure for our own sense of, pleasure, where we're connected to the higher source of that joy and that bliss of the soul. And when we're right on this scale, then we don't pay too high of a price for our happiness. When it's connected to bliss and joy, then the price is never too high, because we're not looking for what we get out of it. And the things that make us happy and that give us pleasure don't drain our energy. They replenish it. And it gives authentic value to our soul's journey. And it becomes something that we share. We become a source of that joy. We become a source of that bliss. And then it overflows from us to everyone else and to everything else in our environment. So this model is related to the three gunas. And I'm going to talk about these things in the course, the weekend course. But again, you want to understand the three gunas operate this way. The tamasic guna is for me and for like my pleasure and my happiness, which is fine. We're supposed to enjoy and be happy and have a certain amount of pleasure. But then the Rajasic guna is the emotional one, which has to do with other people, where we still get something, but we also give something. So the Tamasic is all about me. The Rajasic is about sharing. I get this much, you get that much. That's when the Rajasic works. And the Sattvic is where it's just connected to the source itself. There's no dialogue or engagement or interaction necessary. It's literally our communion with that soul's energy itself. That soul's energy of bliss and joy, which then overflows. Again, you can see how it's higher than the lower ones, because when we're connected to the source itself and following our bliss, we say this all the time. When we're following our bliss, bliss just flows out of us. When we're doing the thing that we love, there's no price to pay. It's almost like we can't do it enough because we're connected to the source. We're plugged into the infinite source of it. And so this evolution of Venus energy is really shown through Taurus. And when we're dialed into that highest quality, we're also not paying too high of a price. And we're also in that yogic state of contentment, of santosha. In the lower states, there's not contentment, there's restlessness. And this is the problem with Taurus energy. One of the biggest things with Taurus energy, the biggest problems, is greed. Greed. It's the opposite of contentment, is greed. You might say, well, I'm not greedy. We're all greedy. I'm greedy. Everyone is greedy. We're greedy for pleasure, for happiness. We want what we want. We want to feel it first. We want to experience it first. And we're always aware of whether we're getting our happiness first. It's in almost every choice we make. All of the food we eat, we want to make sure it tastes good first. Now, again, it doesn't mean that's the only option. And this is what we need to evolve as it relates to Taurus energy. Everything is not just about the pleasure. It's about the vitality. It's about the price we're willing to pay for the pleasure. We can get a little bit of pleasure and still be healthy and vital and have vitality and maintain our values, because values are more important. Again, this is why I started with the whole concept, not just the smaller versions. The concept is values. And what do we value? Do we value our energy and our vitality and the people, or do we value the pleasure in the moment right now, or the happiness that I'm getting right now? Or is there something larger that we're plugged into? Right? And so this, when we're plugged into the higher the vibration goes with Taurus, the less our values are contingent upon something that's connected to pleasure, because our highest value is not pleasure. When our highest value is pleasure in any given moment, it's out of balance. We can have some pleasure, but that's not the purpose of a human life. You can look at animals. Look at a dog. Look at dogs. I use dogs as an example because, again, their nature is, they're very loving, creatures. But you have to prevent an animal from eating itself into obesity and death. Most dogs, right? You can't. They'll just gorge. That's greed. That's greediness. As it relates to the more subtle vibrations, because most of us understand the thing with the food and we can see that very clearly, but we don't see it so clearly in relationships. Most of what we do with Venus energy has to do with relationships with other people. Every person who wants to get a relationship astrology reading or this or that, they're always about what the other person, when I find the person that's just going to basically, not even basically, but literally, let me be whoever I am and just never make me have to change or adjust, because I want what I want. I want it to look this way, and I don't want to have to do any adjusting. I don't want to do any work. Now, again, I'm exaggerating, because of course we work. Relationships make us work, and we're willing to work. This is true. This is what relationships teach us, how much we're willing to work in order to get what we want. But it's always based on what we want. Be honest. What you get out of it is the first thing. And in fact, as soon as you stop getting out of it what you want, forget it. That's nothing wrong with that. But that's the hook. It's about your pleasure and your happiness and pleasure first. And it's both. Happiness, whatever it is that makes you happy, you want the partner to do that. And that's going to be tied to some kind of pleasure, usually some kind of sexual pleasure. It's first about you getting that and saying, I finally found someone where I can get some of that. This is why we stay in it. This is God's divine plan. This is how God teaches us. He knows we're not going to change at all unless there's some big payoff, some big pleasure like sex, and some big happiness, like some emotional reward that makes us compromise. Because other than that, we'll never compromise. We'll never give in to what the other person is pulling us and changing us to do, unless there's some reward, some payoff. Again, I'm saying it in kind of harsh and brutal terms, but it's because we have a lot of delusions around these things. We come from it from a point of view that's like, well, I do this and I do that, and it's this back and forth. Yeah, there's a back and forth, but underneath it all, the motivating force and factor is our pleasure, how much happiness is there in a more subtle way. But ultimately, there's a part of you, even with relationships, they will only go so far. Even that, after a while, you're like, okay, we're working through this. We get it. There's sexuality, because that gets old after a while too. There's happiness, but there's only so much happiness we can get with each other. Ultimately, this is why relationships also don't continue, frankly, unless there's a Jupiter connection, but this isn't about that. Jupiter is something like kids or spiritual purpose or something, because eventually what we're really trying to connect with, even in a relationship, is the bliss of the soul. We're trying to find the bliss. And if you're trying to make that other person some connection to the bliss of your soul, it's very hard, because the bliss of your soul is not conditioned on another person. And that's just going to disappoint you. The relationship it's a rajasic engagement. It's about kama and desire, not about dharma and God and ultimate higher truthful wisdom. It's about kama and desire, and working through your desires and seeing how you navigate your desires and the price to pay. Like I said, it's always, how high of a price are you willing to pay for this pleasure and this happiness? That's Venus. And this is why Venus is the karaka of relationships, because that's what relationships get us doing. They're not about pure love. They're not about love. Love is connected to dharma. Children teach us love. God teaches us love. And ourself teaches us love. We love ourselves more than anything. Admit it. Again, we forgive ourselves of everything. Every mistake we make, we forgive ourselves unconditionally. And we remember every mistake the other person makes. Every one, we always remember. We remember how it hurt us because we love ourselves. And we're trying to love the other person. Admit it. It's true. And it's fine. But Venus is the one that teaches us this. And the hook is the desire, is the pleasure. This is why relationships, for example, really get us trying to evolve through a lot of different levels that are immediate. Pleasure, happiness, joy, and bliss. And they all kind of smash around in our consciousness. That's why it's important to break these things out. Shady said, yes, we are God. We love ourselves. Yeah, but the other person is God too. We are not the center of the universe, and your ego isn't God. If you want to love yourself, great. But that means that that self in you is also the self of the other person. We don't love ourself in this regard. We love our ego. Just to make the distinction. So with Taurus, again, these are big issues right now because, especially I think because of a lot of the social distancing and a lot of the literal practical things, we're not around each other as much. And so there's a lot of tendency to maybe get, to be acting a little bit out of alignment with our values right now because of this situation. So notice that, and notice your relationships, your relationship connections, your greediness, your desire to want to experience it first and to have it, your capacity to accommodate and compromise, something much higher than that, which is that bliss of the soul, which is found in things like, God and nature, things where you don't want anything in return. We don't go out in nature and go, oh, but that sunset, and I wish it was more blue, or whatever it might be. We might, which would be sad, but usually we just see it. We don't want anything from it. This is where it really turns, where suffering comes in, is when we want to possess and own some of the beauty, especially if we want to possess and own the other person. This is what really also sends relationships over the cliff. When we see the other person as something we own, that's mine, which includes, my entitlement to your good mood all the time, or whatever it is. And we all do it. I'm not lecturing here. This is where it goes, though, is that part of your mind and life is mine. I own it. And you need to do what I want, or else I'm now angry at the part of you that I own that's not doing what I need. Again, it just gets all twisted up. That possessiveness. Again, notice the difference, our difference in our possessiveness with authentic beauty and authentic bliss, something that we just love. We want everybody to love it. We want other people to love it. Look at our children. I talked about children as pure love, and we want everyone to love our children. Think of something that you really love that just gives you bliss and joy and beauty. Maybe like astrology or something. You don't feel possessive of it like it's mine. And if I don't get something from it, then I'm jealous of others who like it. Or when all that comes in, that's the greedy possessiveness. And it really comes in the Venus equation. Because when we feel like our happiness and our bliss and our pleasure is tied up in this external experience or person, and then we get into all kinds of, well, I did this for you, and I did that for you, and so you're supposed to do this, and all of the conditions. The real thing Venus is teaching us through Taurus and Libra is unconditionality and how to navigate these conditions and see ourselves in them. And so that unconditionality is connected to that sattvic quality that is above it all. And that leads us to the santosha, or the contentment. Human beings, we're stressed and restless because of that possessiveness. That's why we're stressed, because of possessiveness. Because we think we have something. We think we have something here. We think we own something or some person. It's bad enough that we think we own things. It's even worse when we think we own people. If you think you own another person, you're in a deep, deep chasm of ignorance. It's bad enough to think we own things like these mugs and stuff, which it's so easy to do that because it's something that we use. But we're also not jealous. If somebody else uses the mug, let them use it. So we're already naturally possessive of objects. But this is why when we objectify people, there's nothing worse than knowing that you're being objectified. This is why objectification is so disgusting and nauseating to a free being. This objectification, again, is all part of this greed and this possessiveness, and there's no peace. Wherever you're trying to possess something or someone, that's where your peace ends. You have no peace. Particularly if you think you own another person. Then you're just going to do nothing but worry and try to control and get utterly paranoid and spun out. No one owns anyone else. I don't care, kids, husband, wife, whatever. No one owns anything here. This is all belongs to the universe, including your body. Now, you inhabit your body, and of course, you want autonomy over your body, but your body is also not you. It belongs to the universe. You're just renting it for a while, and you're here to take care of it. We're here to take care of the body as our vahana, or our vehicle, but even your body belongs to the divine. And if you love God, you'll love your body as God. But you won't possess it. When it's time for it to leave, you say, okay. Very high state. I'm not there. I'm not pretending I am. But it's important to understand the culmination of these principles and these ideas. This is how we learn and why we learn things. We can learn them on many levels. So the nakshatra is Krittika. I haven't even talked about that yet. I've been going on here. Anyway, so nakshatra is Krittika, which is the cutter, which is to cut and separate and cut things with a lot of discrimination. And this is the nakshatra where the moon is in its exalted state. And so this is an exalted moon now, which means that the moon is in its highest point in Taurus because it's where the heart can sit in that rested state. It's it's easiest for the moon or the heart and the emotions to be still and peaceful when it's in Taurus than any other sign, because it's fixed earth. And the moon is the feeling, emotional mind. It's the mind and the heart connected to the moment. Every moment we have to navigate, and we're trying to integrate. And it's the moon that does this. It goes between our limited experiences through the body and our unlimited divine nature. So between that limited physical body and experience in the moment and our unlimited cosmic self, which is not localized, it's infinite, between those two things are the emotions. So they're tethered to this moment, but also tethered to the infinite, to the cosmic. That's why the moon is called the Jiva Atman. And it's the mind and consciousness that goes with you from lifetime to lifetime and has all of your karma there in your mind. So the moon is always trying to navigate this moment with everything else that's ever happened in the history of your soul. Is any wonder we're crazy? And you wonder we're like neurotic. But it's the most stable in Taurus because it's fixed earth. It's solid. It's not that vacillating emotions. And in Krittika, especially because Krittika is, the symbol is the cutter, where we cut through the illusion of our identity. So that illusion of our identity is what keeps us attached, and what creates all the greed and all that stuff I was talking about before, is because we're attached to this identity that is separate and false. And Krittika, the cutter, cuts that off. And literally, it's like a razor. So Amy asked about Algol, 2 degrees of Taurus, been wondering. Again, we use words like violent and all this. You have to be careful with this kind of language, okay? Ardra is violent. Violent is just in a worldly sense. We can look at things and put them in this sort of polarized paradigm. It's very similar energy to the cutter. It's cut. It's just cutting. Okay? It can be violent. It's not violent if you want surgery. You need to cut something. So it's just an energy. Try to be careful with, especially this is, Western astrology, where everything is of this world and it's good or bad, and it's in all these polarized, this sort of polarity. It's the same energy. Like I just described with a razor, it's cutting. And it's cutting at a place where things are stable and solid. So there's a lot of this energy. This is why people also say, why is it exalted in Krittika, not Rohini, where it's supposedly the favorite wife of the moon? Because it's a different energy. And what we need to do is look at why and explain it and say, yes, because the highest exalted quality is not the place where it's the most comfortable. The highest exalted quality for the moon is where we cut through all of that emotional attachment. And so there's that. You always have to look deeper, especially if it's some Western, and again, I'm not knocking Western astrology or whatever, but everything in the West is just lacking in nuance usually. Was it good or bad? Good or bad? Good or bad? Like all of it is good or bad. Sometimes the worst thing is the thing that's the most comforting. So we can never get in these simple boxes where we get stuck in some sort of pigeonholed place. So there's this healthy discrimination, which is really what Krittika is about. That razor's edge of discernment, because we don't have any discernment. We don't have any discernment. We don't have any discrimination, particularly where the moon is concerned, because it's emotions. It's just the moon is how we feel, and our feelings are all over the place. We have no sense when it comes to the moon or our feelings and emotions. So in Taurus, the moon is stable in that place where it stops wavering so much. Think about the other signs. Think about the moon, like in Gemini, there's a lot of air blowing, so it's like waves, right? Even in Cancer, its own sign, there's a lot of water, so the emotion is even magnified. Leo, there's a lot of fire that's kind of like pushing the emotion. Again, think of all this. Taurus, it's like the most stable. It's like solid, stable. In fact, it's even where we can be stuck. But that's actually good for the moon, the emotions, because the emotions are where we're generally wavering between a bunch of different things. So it gets stable in Taurus, and then the first section of it is Krittika, where there's also a lot of discernment, a lot of discrimination. Think of you wanting to cut something. Let's say you're wanting to cut vegetables because you want to make a good stew or a good soup or something. You got to get a knife, you got to cut it. You don't want to cut it on something that's moving all over the place. What if you're trying to cut on something that's moving on like a moving boat, or you don't even have a solid platform underneath of you. So if you want to cut through all the emotional illusion in the mind, Taurus and Krittika is like the best place. It's where it's stable and there's cutting. So this quality is very important for exalting the moon, so that we cut through all of the illusion and get to the pure love. Because what we're trying to get to with the moon is something that is beyond emotion, because emotion is just the surface of the moon, of the heart, just like the waves are the surface of the ocean. Waves are the surface, but the surface is not the depth. If you're just on the surface, you're just riding up and down. But if you want to really see what's if you really want to go to the depth of the heart, you have to go deeper than that. And so again, the other great thing with Taurus, and if you want to even see it with Kritika, Kritika is ruled by the god Agni, the god of fire, and fire is the light of discrimination. This is like a mandala of meditation, because when we're trying to meditate, it's the moon part of us that's trying to meditate. It's the moon that needs to meditate. It needs to calm down. It needs to stop all of the wavering. It needs to stop all of the emotions. This is why we don't meditate, because of the moon, and why we eventually do meditate. The moon is our connection to everything that's beyond the mind, or what we would call the mind, beyond the ego. And we need to calm it down first. It needs to be as stable as we can get it. But then we need to cut through and not just say, okay, now I'm stable. I think I'll take a nap. I think I'll just sit here and not change. No, that fire of consciousness is there, cutting through and going, when I'm still, I feel peaceful. I feel depth. I feel what's beyond. And that shows up like a sort of knife cutting through the illusion that we're usually under, which is, I'm all of these emotions. I feel this thing and it's me. Because the emotions aren't something separate from us. When we're feeling an emotion, we're living it. It's like real. We're not angry, we're anger. When we get angry, we become anger. When we get lustful, we become lust. When we become, happy, when we're happy with something, we become happiness. It takes us over. That's what the moon is. That's what emotions are. That's what feelings are. We lose ourselves in it. And discrimination and spiritual power, and literally once our soul begins to evolve, we stop losing ourselves in all of our emotions and in everything, because we lose ourselves in all of our experiences, but most of it is some emotional experience. We're always following our emotional experiences and losing ourselves in them. So this is a real placement for not losing yourself in your emotional, in the emotions of the moment. Like I said when I started, the moon is literally our feeling nature, which is not just the emotions, but it's our feeling nature in the moment. That's what emotions are, I should say. Emotions connect our feeling nature to the moment and tries to go between that moment and the infinite. And the way that shows up is some feeling, some emotion, and we lose ourselves in that. So instead we have to find ourselves in that. So we can also find ourselves in that. And so this new moon in Taurus can really show a time. And again, it's not just a moment. This is a cycle. So this next 30-day cycle with this exalted moon in Taurus and Kritika is a time to really connect with your mind in this deeper emotional, or beyond just the emotions, to a deeper devotional state. Because what happens, again, it's exalted in this sign of devotion also. It's Taurus. All that stuff I talked about with Taurus elevates the moon in the way I just described. So this next 30 days, very good for connecting your values to important practices so that you're not just triggered emotionally and kind of spinning out that way. Now, as you see, we also have Venus and Mercury are also there in Taurus, which is not surprising. It's not unusual when we have the new moons because the sun is often very close to Venus and Mercury. But here it's very significant because Venus is the ruler and Mercury is also there. But especially Venus as being the ruler is quite important because it has the power of Venus, that power to connect to the source of beauty and bliss. Right there, joined the moon. And again, one of the reasons why Taurus is so elevating for the moon is because the moon part of us, our mind and our emotions and our heart really just wants to feel good. We really just we very much gravitate toward things that feel good. Again, it might sound simple, but there's a lot of things that don't feel good. And in fact, when people have the moon in difficult places, one of the problems is that they're always gravitating toward things that don't necessarily feel good. That's not necessarily bad or wrong, but it can be unsettling. They can be unsettling themselves all the time. So one of the real benefits of the moon in Taurus is we're really connected to something that feels good to us. And from there, that bliss of the soul is not too far away. If we can just then stabilize the mind, if we can just calm it down and stabilize it a little bit, when it's in Taurus, that bliss is not too far away. So having Venus there is a great blessing as well. You know, the other thing that's also significant is Jupiter is also casting an aspect over here. Jupiter is also aspecting this. And so again, Jupiter has joined the ruler, Saturn. So it's really been a time for us now to connect with our teachers and our teachings and put them into practice. I just did a video about that. And it's sharing that aspect with this new moon. So it's really a good time to put your teachings into practice, especially those spiritual teachings and those meditations and those meditative teachings. Particularly, again, because we have Saturn in its own sign, Venus in its own sign, these planets in higher dignity, as well as ruling this Jupiter. It's really a time to put those higher teachings into practice. Amy said, do you recommend fasting in the lunar cycle? Look, I'm careful to not recommend. I don't know everybody's life or everybody's chart or whatever, but fasting is definitely something that is supported now these days, especially also because of these planets on certain cycles, and especially on the new moon, on new moons, and also on the day before, which is the Shivaratri. It's always good to fast a little bit, to take less food. And we often just feel like it, actually, what winds up happening. I know I do. On the 14th day and the new moon, which is today and tomorrow. So, I don't make recommendations per se because of, everyone has a different health. But if you're one who fasts, fasting is definitely a good thing to do for your health. At least a couple days a month on what's called Ekadashi. Those are the days to fast. Those are the 11th lunar days. But the lunations are also a time, if not to do a total fast, at least to cut down, and maybe just do fruit or juice or something like that. I definitely just naturally do it, and I naturally did it today, and we'll probably do for the next couple days. This and again, when we're paying attention to these rhythms, we naturally do these things. We naturally do them. Caesar said, you talked about detachment and peace, but isn't astrology about the outer form and how it works? No, it's not. Isn't there an inner world, another dimension outside astrology and this world of form? Well, no. The world of form comes from the inner world. So astrology is not just about outer stuff, no. So I get that you've been taught that, but that's really not the case at all. The planets are the divine forces of intelligence and wisdom inside. Everything in the outer world, which I'm going to say your outer world, because the outer world is the outer world that you've created with your karma, which is all the inner world. Everything outer that you do comes from something inner. So how could astrology just be outer when the source of the outer is the inner? Now, again, sometimes it's taught that way. And it's unfortunate because then it reduces astrology to fortune telling, like it's all just about external stuff. But the source of everything external is internal, and that's also read. If the new moon transits a house every 2.5 days, how come the new moon defines the next 30 days? Because it's a cycle, just like your birth time. You were born one moment in time, and that one moment in time, you can read your whole life from it. The same is true with any initiation point. It's no different than any other chart. This is the energy of the sun and moon coming together at that moment, and that's going to be the moment for the next cycle. Just like any what's called a muhurta. Amy says, I understand. I do it on Amavasya in both Shukla and Krishna Ashtami because my Tithi Lord is Rahu. Purify the energy. Yeah, Purnima, again, just pay attention. You can do it. Look, yeah, Purnima is also one that that generally it's said to take less food or fast. You're talking about Ashtami because of Rahu. Because of Rahu, hang on. The yogic days of fasting are Ekadashi, which is the 11th day. So those are the ones that are recommended in a general yoga practice as well. So there you have it. So just to say that, again, if people want to see how this will affect your life for the next 30 days, you can go to the member site here. This where there is, as you see, it's been scrolling beneath the entire time. But here's another link. This is another direct link. astrologytraininglab.com. Again, I'm going to be doing the forecast for each of the 12 signs. You also get 8 hours worth of classes. Again, this is just for 50 cents. So I can't make it any more easy for people to get involved. People always ask me, what's the easiest way to get involved, to track the daily? Can I track it and learn? And this is about the best deal I've seen. 50 cents, you get these great foundational courses. You also get to understand how Vedic astrology is also connected to Western sciences like neuroscience and quantum physics. You also get 14 days worth of forecasts. And you also get the new and full moon forecast, because I'm going to be doing the forecast for each of the 12 signs, this Taurus cycle for the 12 signs after I do this. And again, 14 days for 50 cents. Then if you want to stay a member, $39.95 every 30 days for as long as you want. You can also, if you want to study about the zodiac, this week, in fact, in a couple days, I'm doing the Rashi's Rulers and the Holistic Zodiac course. Again, huge social distancing discount, $100 discount, and you'll really learn about the zodiac itself, its holistic properties, its connection to the bhavas or the signs, or the houses. You'll learn magic number 12, 12 signs, houses, and months, the astronomy, the sacred astronomy behind the zodiac, becoming the signs and the houses nailed together, the planets as ruling signs and houses from every perspective, interpretive similarities and differences between the signs and houses because they're similar but different, the planet house and the other house it rules, which is very important when you start actually reading charts. And all 12 signs examined through the holistic zodiac. And then even doing readings just with planets in signs. So you could do great readings even if you don't have accurate birth times by just looking at planets and signs. And then also making predictions with just transits. And so again, check out that link and you'll definitely, I'm sure you'll really benefit if you're interested. It's usually about $100 for these classes. It's going to be 8 hours between Saturday and Sunday. And then you have and then we have a week, and then we come back the next week, and you can ask me questions. You also will get a certificate of merit from my school because this is such an important subject. You get a certificate of merit, and again, you can share that online and other places if you're starting to read charts. And this, you also get a graduate badge from the school. And so I really encourage people to check that out. Amy says, thank you for your continued presence as a light in the darkness of these strange times. You're certainly welcome, Amy. It's my pleasure. Thank you for your continued participation. And Amy's also a very serious astrology student, doing great work herself and learning how to do this. Look, folks, this is the reason you're here. People get so stuck and so hung up on the momentary stuff of the world. And look, so do I. I do too. But there's something more eternal than all of this. We're going to be beyond all of this one day, the stuff like with the COVID or whatever. The world isn't going to stop. And all of this is, you're here to know the nature of the self. You're here to learn this stuff. This is the stuff you're here to learn. You're here to align with the rhythms of the cosmos. They're your true rhythm. You're not this body that's lives in this country and that has this thing going on. You're an eternal being. That's your nature. And we all lose ourselves in it. But that's why we incarnate in this world with all this attachment, so that we lose ourselves and then find ourselves. We're here to find ourselves. And, some people asked one time, I was in my yoga teacher's training, they said, if I'm here to find myself, then what relationship do I have with everybody else? Why is everybody else here? What's my relationship with all the other people? And the answer was, all the other people are here to help you. So we're all here to help each other awaken in our relationships with each other. The difficult ones especially. They're your great soul friends. And others who touch your life or bring wisdom or bring difficulty, they're also here to help you. They're here to help you see a part of your mind and life that is just an illusion. because underneath it all, you're much bigger than any box that can define you. But the real source of this wisdom, especially if you want to understand how it all works, is astrology. So you're here to know this and to learn this. So I'll do whatever I can to try to help. And I'm always happy that there are great students to listen to what I have to say and hopefully, evolve with me. So you all have a good one, and we'll be in touch.